this is Debbie from Line Doodle Design, and today for Sam Says Stamp I'm going to create this card using layered Valentine's die cuts over a softly ink blended heat embossed background. Every month for the last few years I've had a creative uses feature with Sam Says Stamp where I attempted to stretch my supplies, and I'm delighted that moving forward into 2017 I'm going to have a feature with Sam Says Stamp again, but this time it's going to be Doodling with Debbie. This feature will have a wider remit. I might be taking a look at the new Sam Says Stamp release, or equally looking back at a previously released product. In today's card I'm using products from the new Hey Love release, which includes this beautiful Emma background, and when I saw this background I immediately knew I wanted to white heat emboss it off the edge of a panel. As this is the cling stamp, I've placed a piece of white card into the MISTI without the foam layer that comes as part of the MISTI, and this allows for the extra thickness of a cling mounted stamp. I've treated the white card with some EK Success powder tool, and this will prevent embossing powder sticking where you don't want it to. And then I've inked up the stamp using Sam Says Stamp clear embossing ink. And with a large background stamp such as this, you want to make sure you give it a really good press down to get the best impression. I've taken the piece of card out of the MISTI and placed a piece of scratch paper on my work surface, and now I'm going to sprinkle Sam Says Stamp white embossing powder all over the card. I like to keep my embossing powders in a spice shaker as I find it easy to shake it out, and then once you've covered the whole area then you can just tap off any excess. I've preheated my heat tool to make sure it's really good and hot, and then brought it to the embossing powder to melt it. Having your heat tool hot beforehand means that you get a minimal amount of warping of the card. Having let the heat embossing cool, I'm now going to blend in some inks over the top in one of my favourite colourways, and that's using Sam Says Stamp, Rosy Cheeks and Melon inks. If you're using darkly coloured inks, it's often a good idea to tap off any excess ink from your ink blender before bringing it to the card. However, Rosy Cheeks is a lovely light coloured pink, and really I don't need to add that step. Melon is a slightly deeper colour, and with this ink I tap off more often to make sure I haven't got too much ink on the ink blender, and this will ensure a smoother blend. I often go backwards and forwards between the two colours, making sure that I get a nice soft blend out towards the edges of the embossed image. With the ink blending now finished, there's nothing better in my opinion than a bit of splatter to step it up a notch, and I like to use Perfect Pearl solution. I add a scoop of Perfect Pearls in a Ranger Mini Mister, give it a good shake up, and then use the tube enclosed to splatter Perfect Pearl solution onto the card. I've set the panel to one side to dry while I work on some die cutting. I'm going to cut both the love and clipping heart dies from some white card. I've used washi to keep those in place while I run it through the Big Shot die cutting machine to die cut. I decided I also wanted one of the nested heart dies cut from white card, so again attached washi and ran that through the die cutting machine. I then started playing around with the positioning of the die cuts, and although I loved all the white on white, I think I did need a bit more definition in there, and so I decided I'd try cutting the love die cut again, but this time from some ink blended card. On a piece of white card I blended in Melon and Rosy Cheek inks to give a gradient effect, and then ran that through the die cutting machine with the love die. I then switched out the white die cut for the ink blended die cut, and I much prefer how that stands out. I've placed all the pieces to one side while I work on one final element. I want to use the small heart from the Love and Quote stamp set. I place the stamp in the Mini Misty along with some white card, and I'm going to stamp that in Teeny Bikini. This is a slightly deeper pink than the Rosy Cheeks, and this will help this little heart pop more and stand out from the other elements. As this is a solid stamp, I found that I needed to re-ink it and stamp it a second time to make sure I got a full impression. This stamp set doesn't have a matching die, however I found that one of the nested heart dies was an almost perfect match. One of my most go-to die sets are the stitch rectangles. I find that this gives a nice professional finish to any panel, and here I'm trying to work out whether to use the slightly smaller one which would fit nicely on a 4-bar card, or whether to use the larger rectangle which would fit onto an A2 card. In the end I opted for the larger die as I felt this gave the focal point more room to breathe with lots of lovely white space around it. Now it's just a case of making final decisions where I want everything placed and then adhering them. I've added foam adhesive to the back of the two hearts, and then for the two more delicate die cuts I'm going to be adhering those with some Ranger Multi-Medium in matte. To make the love die cut stand out more, I'm going to attach the ink blended die cut to the white die cut that I originally cut out, and this will give it a little more dimension. To attach the two together I'm using dots of Ranger Multi-Medium in matte on the back of the ink blended die cut before attaching it to the white one. With everything now prepared, I've taken the backers off the foam adhesive on the large heart and added that to the panel. I've then laid the clip heart die on top without any adhesive, but I'm using the adhesive on the back of the love die cut to keep it in place. And finally added the small heart with foam adhesive, and again this will help keep the clipping die cut in place. I added plenty of foam adhesive to the back of the panel and then attached that to a white side folding A2 card. Finally, I chose some sequins from Little Things from Lucy's cards and attached those 3-inch multi-medium in matte. And that completes this card with layered Valentine's die cuts over a softly ink blended background. On the Sam Says Stamp blog, you'll find a coordinating blog post as well as links to the supplies that I used today. If you want to find me, I blog over at limedoodledesign.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.